It all started with a spark. Not the kind you see in fireworks. Not the kind that lights up a city. No. This spark was quiet. Hidden. Almost forgotten. It took place in a dusty backyard, in a small town somewhere in Africa. No fancy lab. No funding. No recognition. Just one mind, one pair of hands, and a vision that refused to die. He wasn't a millionaire. He wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't even an engineer by degree. But he had something no textbook could ever teach: relentless curiosity. Every morning, while others rushed off to jobs, to routines, to comfort, he stepped into his makeshift workshop. Corrugated metal sheets. Wooden planks. Scattered wires. Old motors. Discarded parts from electronic waste. This was his world. Most people walked past his backyard and smirked. "What's he building now?" they'd whisper. "Just wasting time." But he didn't flinch. Because he knew something they didn't. He saw beyond the rusted metal. He saw potential. Not just to create, but to solve. To fix something the world had ignored for too long. You see, in his village, electricity was a luxury. Blackouts were normal. Entire nights in darkness. Children couldn't study. Families couldn't store food. Businesses couldn't grow. But the government? Silent. Foreign aid? Delayed. Hope? Fading. So he said to himself, "If they won't bring power, I will." And that's where the spark became a fire. Using nothing but scrap materials, an old car battery, solar panels from a broken streetlight, and a repurposed washing machine motor, he built a power generator. Not just any generator. One that could run on wind and sun, with storage capacity that lasted through the night. It was small, portable, scalable, and completely off-grid. He tested it for weeks, tweaked the circuit, improved the blade design, optimized the solar efficiency. Failed. Tried again. Failed better. Then one night, something changed. He flipped the switch. The small fan blades began to spin. The lights blinked. And then a glow. His entire backyard lit up. The bulb above his head. The radio he wired in. The small fridge he had once given up on. It all worked. That night, his neighbors didn't just see light. They saw possibility. They saw what one person, just one, could do with a dream and a few broken parts. Word spread fast. Videos of his invention made their way onto the internet. First, local bloggers. Then, African tech influencers. Then, international media. Engineers from Europe called him a garage genius. American YouTubers reacted with awe. A Japanese firm reached out to offer resources. Suddenly, the world that once ignored him couldn't look away. Investors showed interest. Universities invited him to speak. Tech startups begged him to collaborate. And still, he stayed humble. Still working from his backyard. Still tweaking his original prototype. Still thinking of how to improve not just one village but every forgotten corner of the world. Because for him, this was never about fame. It was about freedom. Energy independence. Giving light to those left in the dark. What's more incredible is what came next. Children who used to struggle in school? Now studying under stable lights. Small shops once limited by short days? Now open longer, making more income. Villages once cut off? Now charging phones, accessing digital learning, storing vaccines in cold boxes, thanks to one invention, built on nothing but scrap, sweat, and stubborn hope. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't speak fluent English. He didn't own a patent. But he sparked a revolution. One that shamed corporations who had billions in resources but no solutions. One that reminded the world that brilliance has no zip code. Innovation has no borders. And genius? It can rise from anywhere, even from a rusty backyard in rural Africa. He proved something powerful. That in a world obsessed with the next big thing, sometimes the most world-changing ideas are born in the smallest places. Not from noise, but from necessity. Not from power, but from pain. Not in labs, but in love, for one's people, one's land, one's future. He wasn't trying to change the world. He just didn't want to live in the dark anymore. But in doing that he lit up more than his backyard. He lit a path forward. For an entire continent. And now? Governments are paying attention. Entrepreneurs are replicating his design. Kids are watching him on YouTube saying, if he can do it, why not me? And that is the true invention. Not just the machine, but the mindset, the courage to begin, the power to believe, the refusal to wait for help. Because one spark, one mind, one moment of defiance can change everything. And the world never saw it coming. But even as praise poured in from around the world, he remained grounded. While TV crews came and went, asking for interviews, he spent more time with wires than with words. The flashing lights of the cameras never distracted him from the one truth he knew deeply: there were still too many people living in the dark. The invention was just the beginning. The real mission had just begun. With growing support, he started replicating his idea across nearby villages. But this time, he didn't do it alone. He taught others. Teenagers, farmers, shopkeepers, mechanics. He didn't just give them electricity, he gave them knowledge. He built a network. Workshops started popping up, under trees, in empty schoolrooms, even beside broken wells. Places where people gathered not to watch, but to learn. His model was simple: use what you have, understand what you need, and never wait for permission to build what your people deserve. And it worked. One by one, villages across the region began to glow at night. Not from imported power grids, but from backyard-built systems. Microgrids, solar wind hybrids, bicycle-powered generators. Every solution was tailored, crafted from local parts, built by local hands. It was a grassroots energy revolution. And the world took notice again. But this time, it wasn't just admiration. It was imitation. Countries across Africa began adopting his model. Remote areas in Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda, all echoing the same spirit. Young inventors started reaching out, asking for mentorship. Some of them had no access to internet, but heard about him on solar-powered radios. He didn't call himself a teacher, but he became one anyway. He didn't call himself a leader, but others followed. He didn't ask for awards, but they came: international prizes, innovation medals, humanitarian honors. But nothing touched him more than this one moment. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, came running to his workshop one evening. In her hand, a crayon drawing, a solar panel, a windmill, and her tiny house with a glowing light bulb inside. She pointed to the man in the corner of the drawing and said, "That's you. You made my home bright. I want to be like you." He paused. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. He bent down, took the drawing gently, and whispered to her, "No, you'll be better than me." Because in that single moment, he realized his invention had evolved beyond tools and wires. It had become a symbol, a spark in the minds of a new generation. A generation that didn't see Africa as the continent waiting to be saved, but as the continent ready to lead. Because that's what happens when one person dares to try, others see themselves in the mirror of their courage. Soon, local governments approached him. They didn't come with contracts. They came with questions. How did you do it so cheaply? How did you get people involved? How can we make this national? And for the first time, he saw the shift. He was no longer just reacting to a broken system. He was influencing the system itself. Policies started changing. Local manufacturers started producing parts specifically for off-grid communities. Educational programs launched to teach rural youth about sustainable energy. NGOs shifted focus from donations to empowerment. All because of one man. One moment. One spark. What he created was bigger than electricity. It was energy for the soul. He became the face of a movement, though he never asked to be. His story was featured in documentaries, tech summits, and UN reports. But his hands? Still busy in the workshop. Because there were still villages without light. Still children without a way to study. Still mothers cooking by candlelight. And he wasn't done. Because when you grow up in a place that the world forgets, you don't just build for recognition. You build because you remember the dark. And you know how powerful it feels to finally step into the light. The light didn't stop at his village. His invention began traveling, without him ever leaving home. Blueprints shared on WhatsApp. Schematics scribbled on paper, passed from town to town. Video clips recorded on cracked phones, showing step-by-step instructions in local dialects. His design became open source before he even knew what that meant. People didn't wait for approval. They built. They improved. They adapted. In northern Uganda, a teenager used his method to power an irrigation pump. In rural Zambia, a midwife used the system to run a cooler for medicine and vaccines. In a fishing village on the coast of Senegal, a group of women used it to keep their catch fresh and double their income. This wasn't just an invention. It had become a language, one of self-reliance, one of hope, one of African brilliance. He watched it all unfold from that same dusty backyard. The metal sheets were still rusted. The windmill still creaked. But something in the air had changed. He had cracked the code. Innovation doesn't need perfect tools. It needs purpose. And now, he had a new purpose. To teach. So, with the help of a few local builders and a retired schoolteacher, he turned the old village hall into something new. No desks. No blackboards. Just workbenches, batteries, motors, solar panels, and open arms. He called it the Energy School. There were no grades. No uniforms. No fees. Only one requirement: bring your curiosity. It became a sanctuary for problem solvers. Young girls who had never been allowed near tools now soldering wires with steady hands. Boys who had once skipped school now helping to wire entire homes. Elders sitting in, fascinated by this new way of thinking. People came from miles away, on bicycles, on foot, by donkey carts. They didn't come just to learn how to build. They came to learn how to believe. The Energy School became more than a training ground. It became a movement. And then, a visitor arrived. Not a journalist. Not a tech executive. But a government minister. He walked in, expecting a quaint classroom. Instead, he saw a room buzzing with innovation. Light bulbs flashing. Children explaining voltage. A girl, no older than 13, presenting her homemade water filter powered by a mini generator. The minister was stunned. "This is the future," he whispered. Weeks later, the government made an announcement. A new initiative would fund 100 more energy schools across the country, modeled on the backyard school that started it all. And guess who they asked to lead the design? He declined the title, but he agreed to help. And with that, his reach expanded far beyond what he'd ever dreamed. Soon, his foundation was born, not to centralize power, but to distribute it. Funding was crowdsourced. Parts were locally sourced. And knowledge? Freely given. The foundation's mission was simple. Light every forgotten home. Teach every forgotten child. Build a continent that never waits again. He became a mentor, a leader, a hero to many. But to him, he was still just that boy who once sat in the dark, wondering what electricity felt like. And though he had offers to move abroad, to study, to work, to live in luxury, he always said the same thing. "I belong here. My spark started here. And it still burns." There were days he broke down. The weight of expectation. The slow pace of bureaucracy. The disbelief of outsiders who thought a poor man couldn't build a nation-changing solution. But then, every time he passed a home lit by his design, every time he saw children reading at night, laughter echoing under powered ceiling fans, he found his strength again. And he kept building. Because what he created was more than a machine. It was a movement born in silence that grew into a roar. And the world? Still catching up. It wasn't long before the spark that started in one village crossed the border. It wasn't carried by planes or politicians. It traveled through people. A student from Ethiopia, visiting relatives in his hometown, witnessed the invention firsthand. He returned to Addis Ababa not with souvenirs, but with blueprints. A nurse from Malawi, moved by how the invention helped preserve medicine, took the idea back to her remote clinic and rewired her entire practice to run on it. And in Sierra Leone, a young fisherman sent a voice note to the foundation. "I saw your wind solar light system online. I built one for my boat. Now I can fish at night. Thank you." These were not customers. These were co-creators. Innovators. Inspired souls who weren't waiting for the future, they were building it in real time. The African genius who started it all watched in awe, not as a CEO, but as a witness to something larger than himself. This was not just about power anymore. This was about sovereignty. Because for too long, Africa had been fed a narrative that the solutions must come from elsewhere. That progress must be imported. That the continent's role was to receive, not to lead. But now, that story was collapsing. And rising in its place? A new story. Of people who fix what's broken. Of youth who code under candlelight, dreaming of global platforms. Of mothers who build turbines with their children using recycled plastic bottles. It was unstoppable. Universities began inviting him not just to speak, but to rewrite curriculum. He introduced programs focused on local engineering, frugal innovation, and decentralized systems. Instead of teaching students to build for corporations, he taught them to build for communities. He challenged the very foundation of development thinking. What if Africa didn't need to catch up? What if it could leap ahead? Not with more, but with less. Not by copying the West, but by creating something never seen before. Tech giants began to watch closely. Some offered partnerships. Others offered buyouts. A few even offered to help scale his invention globally. But he politely declined. Because the mission wasn't to make shareholders rich. It was to make people free. Freedom to light your home. Freedom to power your dreams. Freedom to build, even when the world tells you to wait. One day, at a regional summit, a young innovator from Sudan approached him with tears in his eyes. "I saw your story online," he said. "I didn't think someone like me could ever invent. But now, I'm building something. And I brought my prototype to show you. It was rough. It was unpolished. But it worked." And he smiled the biggest smile of his life. Because that moment, right there, was everything he ever dreamed of. Not the awards. Not the headlines. Not even the global fame. But seeing another spark catch fire. A generation rising, not just to consume, but to create. Soon, he started building something new. Not a machine. Not a foundation. A platform. An online hub where anyone in Africa, urban or rural, could access blueprints, tutorials, translated guides in local languages. A digital village square for builders, tinkerers, thinkers, and doers. It was called AfriSpark. The idea? Simple. If you have the will, we'll help you find the way. From Cameroon to Cape Town, Mozambique to Morocco, the sparks kept flying. Young people began uploading their inventions, sharing tips, collaborating across cultures, languages, and borders. Some built solar ovens. Others created water purifiers powered by bike pedals. A boy in Chad built a mobile phone charging station powered by a kite. Innovation was no longer top-down. It was bottom-up, horizontal, communal, empowered. The world, once shocked by one inventor, was now stunned by thousands. And the original genius? He remained in his backyard. The same backyard that started it all. Though now, it had changed. A canopy for shade. Solar roof tiles. A row of student-made turbines spinning proudly. Kids running around, laughing, learning. But he? Still wearing the same shirt. Still covered in grease. Still fixing. Still teaching. Still building. Because his fire hadn't dimmed. It had just spread. From one mind to a million. From one corner of Africa to the heart of the world. And still, no one saw it coming. But now? They see it. They feel it. They fear it. They admire it. Because one thing has become undeniable. The future is not waiting. The future is being built. And Africa is holding the tools. Years passed. The man who once toiled quietly in his backyard now found himself receiving letters from presidents, professors, and even astronauts. But he never chased those moments. He always said, recognition should follow impact, not the other way around. And impact? It was now global. In Brazil, a rainforest community replicated his hybrid energy model to power schools deep in the Amazon. In rural Nepal, a young girl used AfriSpark to build her own solar-powered reading light and sent him a photo with a note. "Now I can study at night like the children in Africa." In the Philippines, a typhoon-devastated village used one of his designs to rebuild their microgrid, one house at a time. He had never stepped foot in these places. But his idea had. And that was the miracle. One idea. Shared freely. Owned collectively. Scaling across the world without borders, business models, or bureaucracy. It was the purest form of revolution. And then, the invitation came. An official letter from the United Nations. They were hosting a global summit on decentralized innovation for sustainable futures. Heads of state would be there. CEOs of billion-dollar tech firms. Nobel laureates. Scientists. Climate activists. And they asked him to give the keynote. At first, he hesitated. "What do I know of summits?" he said. But the children from his school wouldn't let him say no. "Your story belongs on that stage," they said. "Because it started with us. It belongs to us." So he went. Not in a tailored suit. But in the same faded shirt, his name stitched into the corner in bright red thread. A gift from the kids. He stood behind the podium, adjusting the microphone nervously. The auditorium was packed. Cameras pointed. Screens lit. A silent anticipation filled the air. He looked up, took a breath, and spoke. "My name is not important," he began. "But where I come from, we used to sit in the dark and wait for help that never came. Until one day, I realized, maybe the help was already in our hands. So I stopped waiting. And I started building." He paused. You could hear the room inhale. "I built a generator from trash. It wasn't perfect. But it worked. And then, something I didn't expect happened. Other people started building too." He spoke not with rehearsed elegance, but with undeniable truth. Not from ego, but from experience. Not about policy, but about people. His words didn't just inform. They inspired. And by the time he finished, the room was on its feet. Not because he was famous, but because he reminded them of what was possible when innovation is rooted in purpose. After the summit, global institutions pledged funding to the AfriSpark network. International NGOs redirected budgets toward open-source, locally driven solutions. Universities around the world requested to embed his curriculum into their engineering programs. The spark was no longer just African. It had become human. And yet, back home, his life remained simple. Every morning, he opened the gates to the energy school. He made tea on a solar stove. Greeted students as they arrived. Fixed broken turbines. Helped a young girl figure out why her water pump was overheating. The work never stopped. And that's how he liked it. One day, a small ceremony was held in his village. Unannounced. Untelevised. Just locals, kids, and elders. They had renamed the road that led to his home. A handmade sign now read, "The Spark Street." A tribute, not just to him, but to the fire he lit in all of them. As the sun set, and the street lamps powered by student-built solar batteries began to glow, he stood quietly under a tree. He looked around at the laughter, the light, the life. A reporter once asked him, "What's your proudest moment?" He thought for a while and then said, "It's not one moment. It's every time a child flips a switch and doesn't have to fear the dark anymore. That's my reward. That's my prize." And so, the spark continues. Passed from hand to hand. From heart to heart. Across borders, generations, and time. Because one day, when the history of innovation is rewritten, not by corporations, but by communities, the first chapter won't be about Silicon Valley. It will begin in a backyard. In Africa. With one spark. And the world still won't believe how it started. But this time, they'll know where to look. In a world obsessed with speed, noise, and overnight success, this story reminds us of something timeless. That real change begins in silence. In the quiet corners of the world. With one soul. One idea. One spark. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for funding. He didn't wait for the world to believe in him. He believed in himself. And because of that, an entire continent began to rise. Not as a follower, but as a force. What started in one backyard became a blueprint for the world. And what that one African genius proved is simple. Sometimes, the most powerful invention is the refusal to give up. If this story lit something in you, hope, curiosity, belief, then stay with us. Because here on this channel, we don't just tell stories. We uncover sparks. We follow the minds the world forgot. We bring you closer to the brilliant, the bold, and the builders shaping tomorrow, quietly, fiercely, and fearlessly. So if you're ready to see what true innovation really looks like, smash that subscribe button. Hit like if this story moved you. Share it with someone who needs to see that anything is possible. And comment below, where did this story take you? What did it spark in you? This is Gearless Garage, where ideas drive the world. And the next spark could be yours.